Hi, welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm Shannon Eliot. Today, we will be examining the relationship between mental health and the internet. Dr. Keely Kolmes is a practicing psychologist based in San Francisco. She does research and consults on clinical and ethical issues related to social networking and technology. Dr. Kolmes has a blog called Mindful Musings, which focuses on mental health issues and therapy-related topics. Veronica Belmont is a technology and gaming-centric video host, also based in San Francisco. She hosts a tech help show called Techzilla and a sci-fi and fantasy show, Sword and Laser. Veronica describes herself as an avid gamer and social networking fanatic with nearly 2 million Twitter followers. Welcome, Veronica, and welcome, Dr. Kolmes. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
To kick us off, Dr. Kolmes, can you tell us what trends and relationships we're seeing between internet usage and mental health?
Well, right now we're seeing a lot of research about how the internet is affecting our brains. And some of the things that we're seeing are things that tell us that it's affecting our attention and concentration, it's affecting our memory, and people have used examples that we now rely on Google and other technology to kind of outsource our memory. And it's also affecting our productivity as that relates to attention and concentration. And some people are feeling that they're more pulled to respond to emails and deal with messages and interact on social networks. And sometimes that gets in the way of getting other things done that have to happen.
Great. Veronica, what are some warning signs that your behavior is becoming negatively affected by the internet?
Well, as Dr. Kolmes stated, it's definitely hard to focus your attention after a while. I think even the average internet user can see themselves being pulled in a million different directions at all times of day. Something as simple as just answering an email becomes difficult because you're getting Twitter responses, you're getting IMs popping up, you're getting all sorts of different information coming at you at the same time, and it's very difficult to focus. I mean, I think that's totally natural. And unplugging is more and more difficult as well. I think people feel anxiety when they have to unplug. They feel as though they're missing out, that something's happening when they're not online.
Dr. Kolmes, I know you mentioned you felt sometimes a sense of guilt when you couldn't respond to an email in a couple seconds. Tell me about that.
Yes, well, I think I've developed a reputation amongst my colleagues and friends as being sort of an immediate responder to email. And I've noticed that I've trained myself to try and get that item out of my inbox. So I tend to respond to things very quickly, and over time that's just become unmanageable. So I've had to think through what is a more sane, reasonable, manageable, and sustainable way to manage things like my inbox.
Well, it's very interesting. There's this whole cottage industry kind of blossoming around getting to inbox zero, like David Allen's getting things done methodology. You get emails piling in all day, and then suddenly you're overwhelmed, and you have to declare bankruptcy, email bankruptcy, which is this term that didn't even exist 10 years ago. And you just have to say, I can't answer all these emails. I have to either put them in some kind of order of importance, and I have to figure out a way to not feel completely bogged down by all of this information. And the need to constantly be answering those emails is almost obsessive.
And I would like to add on to that and say that this is something that comes up a lot with my clients. My clients are also talking about this with me, and we're often strategizing how they can get out of that hole of, the massive growing list of emails they need to respond to.
I even find myself now completely staying away from my inbox just out of fear of what's going to be there. I'm like, I don't want to look at this, I don't want to deal with this right now. But then I get more stressed out because I'm not answering important emails.
And wondering what's sitting for you there, yeah.
Exactly, and just knowing that the second I log in, I'm going to be totally, tidal wave of messages.
And I know with you being in social media and a video host with tons of videos online, that opens you up to a lot of comments from people and feedback from people, and that's a whole other layer beyond emails. So how do you deal with that, and how does that make you feel when you get something, less than positive or something really, really positive congratulating you on your work?
It's funny because it seems like the negative comments always weigh more heavily on your mind than the positive comments. And it's actually a daily trial to kind of learn to balance those out and say, well, there's a lot of people appreciating the work you're doing. You know, whether you're a writer, or whether you're a blogger or a video host or just someone who works online in general, you're always going to be getting feedback. And a lot of that feedback is going to be coming from people who are anonymous. And there's oftentimes no filter there when you're anonymous, and people say things that they would never say to your face.
Yeah.
And it's hard. You have to kind of learn how to say, well, you know, that person doesn't know me. They may not, you know what I'm trying to accomplish with my work, or, you know, they just don't care. That's fine. There's other people that I'm reaching that do care.
How did you work through that, and what kind of advice would you give to an up-and-coming social media personality, an up-and-coming host that's posting things on YouTube, having gone through it yourself?
There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. I noticed myself focusing in on certain comments, and it would stick with me for the whole day. And I had to kind of learn to take my attention away from that and to say, all right, well, I'm not going to go look at the comments on this YouTube video. I'm just going to ignore them. There's entire Chrome plugins now, or plugins for Firefox even, that will turn off all comments on YouTube. Maybe that's not the most productive, but it definitely does kind of take you out of that immediate need to read the comments and get that feedback that may not be positive. But at the same time, it's also my job to stay connected to my viewers and stay connected to my readers and take their feedback and integrate it into my work. So it's definitely a toss-up. Yeah, it's
fine
a fine
line,
line.
delicate balance. Dr. Kolmes, how does increased internet usage affect our interpersonal relationships?
Well, it can affect our relationships in some really wonderful ways and in some not so wonderful ways. There's a lot of ways that people are now using social networking to get support for issues that they're dealing with, whether they be mental health issues, or I know some folks who had babies or had surgeries, and there are now sites where you can coordinate people bringing meals to your house.
Wow.
And really helping you to get through difficult times. So I think it's really lovely how social networking can allow people to reach out to their community and actually get the support they need. But at the same time, there can also be a splintering effect when you're no longer socializing face-to-face, maybe feeling isolated, and as Veronica had mentioned before, feeling like you're missing out on things, or being a voyeur to social interactions that are not including you. And I think those are ways that it can actually increase the sense of isolation and disconnection that people sometimes feel.
One of the positive aspects of being anonymous online is that you can go into these groups, these support groups, and feel as though you have a safe place to discuss issues or problems that you're having. I had an interesting experience years ago, actually, when Second Life was very popular. There was an anxiety support group, and that's something that I've suffered from personally. And I was like, okay, I'll check this out and see what this feels like. And so I logged in with my avatar, and everyone was sitting around in a circle, like you would see at a summer camp, and they were just taking turns and talking about their experiences. And I was concerned about the privacy matter because in that game you can take screenshots and you can, save people's information, but they forbid that. That was one of the rules of coming to this meeting, is that you couldn't take any screenshots. And when you did, it would make a very loud camera noise, so everyone knew it was you, and you would be then banned from the group. So the internet has come up with a lot of very interesting ways for people to get together and discuss private matters that they may not have an outlet for in the real world.
And in addition to that, there are a lot of other people who are seeking resources, maybe for issues that are difficult to find practitioners in their area who can help with. So for example, transgender clients, or people who are dealing with issues where there's no specialist in their area. Some of these folks are using telemental health services, not just to find support groups, but to connect with a clinician who may not be local, but who's better equipped to help them deal with these issues. So again, this is another way that the internet and technology is allowing people to get support and help and to feel better.
That's interesting you bring that up, because that presents a whole other issue of privacy and HIPAA, and can things be hacked, and can folks listen in on you? So how do clinicians navigate that very fine line?
It's very tricky right now. The sites that are the most easy to use and common, such as Skype, are not HIPAA compliant. So there are some other sites like Nefsys that are HIPAA compliant, but then not MAC compatible. So practitioners who offer telemental health services right now are really struggling to find the best sites that offer the highest security. And then at the same time, there are also licensing issues, where typically in most states you need to be licensed in the state in which the client resides. So unless you're going to have licenses in both states, you're going to be in a bind if you're trying to provide services to people nationally. Now that may change because of this trend in moving more towards telemental health services. So that's something that it remains to be seen how that'll be addressed.
Before the show, I remember you telling me about your own principle of harm reduction that you were implementing. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you find giving therapy is also therapeutic to you?
Well, one of the things that I have been noticing recently, just about the time that you contacted me, it was very timely, is that I was noticing that I wasn't getting the same bang for my buck from my internet usage that I used to. I was also experiencing that sense of overwhelm at my inbox and feeling like I was getting a lot of random contact from strangers asking me questions, as well as job opportunities and people wanting to become my clients. And it was becoming really hard to figure out how to tame my inbox, how to focus my attention on the things that really mattered. And one of the things that I noticed is that when I would spend a 50-minute session with a client where I'm not checking my email or looking at my phone, there was something very refreshing about that period of focus and really paying attention to another person, no gadgets in sight, at least not mine. Sometimes my clients might get a message. But I was thinking a lot about that and how I found that really healing to have these moments of engagement. And it made me really think about how I could have more of that in my life outside of work.
This next question is for both of you. I'm curious how excessive internet usage affects pre-existing mental health conditions. And I know, Veronica, you talked a little bit about your anxiety and how Second Life helped you with that. Are there any other ways that the internet has helped you with that? And conversely, are there any ways it made it worse?
That's an interesting question. From an anxiety point of view, I have to say that it's probably made it a little worse for me personally, just because I do have the fear of missing out syndrome, I guess. I don't think it's technically a syndrome yet, but maybe someday. It's that sense that you are not doing the thing that all the other people are doing at that moment. Like you see photos on Instagram, you see updates on Foursquare or on Facebook of cool parties happening, or
that social pressure.
Why wasn't I invited to that? That looks really fun. But for me, it's really more about learning when and how to unplug. If you're having a nice dinner if I'm having a nice dinner with my husband and we're sitting there and we're both on our cell phones at the same time, there's that sense of we're not really connecting in the same moment, in the same place, and enjoying each other's company. And so it's really a process of both people needing to learn how to put the phones down, maybe make a rule that once a check comes, that's when you're allowed to go back and look at Twitter or check your email. Little rules like that can help kind of set the guidelines for that kind of situation. But overall, it has made my anxiety a little bit worse, just because I do feel that constant need to be connected, and maybe that's a product of my career and the job that I do, but I see it in all sorts of people. So I think it's a little more widespread than we like to admit.
I like how you're talking about negotiation around the rituals and conventions and norms in your relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are some apps. We've spoken in the past about Pair, which is an app for people in a relationship to kind of share little cute moments together. You can thumb kiss by putting your thumb on the screen at the same time, and then it lights up pink. Little things like that are cute, but I don't think they're a solution for this kind of scenario. But they can help. They can, if you both love technology, it's a great way for you to kind of have a little moment together.
And I think in response to the question about pre-existing mental health conditions, I think it depends on whether people are using technology in ways that promote health or are further enabling their depression or anxiety to hurt them in some ways.
So building on that, how would you work with someone coming into you seeking treatment for an unhealthy relationship with the internet?
I think the best strategy is really an individual approach. So I'm really interested in talking to people about what a healthy relationship with the internet looks like for them. I think that it's no more helpful to tell a person to just stay off the internet than it would be to tell someone with food and eating issues, well, just stop eating.
Right.
Most of us have work lives and social lives that require us to be online. So I think really looking with my client at what they're doing, what feels like it's hurting and what feels like it's helping, and devising a plan that actually feels healthy and manageable for them is the best thing to do. And that's why I call it a harm reduction strategy. So something that minimizes the harm, increases joy and connection.
I was actually looking at a new Chrome extension called Morphine recently, which allows you to view the sites that you consider fun only once you've earned a certain number of points doing productive things. So if you try to visit a website like YouTube, for example, it'll just be blocked off. And then if you've accumulated enough points in the add-on, you'll see a little marker that shows how many points you need in order to turn that video on. So if you're doing email and being productive, you accumulate points, and then you can have your fun once you're done your actual work.
Kind of like that old chart we had when we were kids with the gold stars.
Like a star chart, exactly.
Chores, we got our allowance, yeah.
It's kind of sad in a way that we need to build these things into our browsers or build these things into our operating systems to actually keep us productive, but at the same time, there seems to be a need for it.
And there are other tools such as Leech Block, Me Timer, I think Rescue Time may be one. Antisocial is a new one. And their tagline is just look how much work you can do when you turn your friends off. But people are really needing these tools to help focus their attention when they're online.
So for both of you, how is the new age of social media affecting your identity and how you see yourself?
Oh, that's a really great question. What I've noticed is that people are making filtered versions of themselves that they share online. It's almost like a curated version of yourself, where you're putting forward all the positive aspects of your life, your personality, your pictures. Those are the forward-facing things to the general public. And that makes total sense. I mean, no one, you know, I say that, but at the same time, there are oversharers out there that will overshare every single aspect of their life. It seems to be in two different kinds of camps. People that are definitely protecting the less awesome parts of their personality, and people who are just kind of internet vomiting all over everything and saying, this is my life, deal with it, you can meet me on Facebook if you want. It goes both ways, and both ways are good and bad for different reasons. Actually, maybe the oversharing, I don't know if that's ever good necessarily. I'm not a victim of that. I like to stay more on the curated end.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I work with a lot of people who are very involved in technology, and a lot of people are really wrestling with what face do I put forward and what do I do for different audiences with friend groups and how they shape their identity and their persona. And I know there's some research, I believe by Dana Boyd and Alice Marwick, on how teens are very savvy about this and how easy it is for adults to misinterpret some of the postings that they post when they're really direct messages for other people. So I think these are really great points that Veronica's raising. And for myself, what I've noticed is I have really honed a professional identity online. And as a psychologist, I feel a lot of responsibility and a lot of reduced freedom in terms of I can't share the same kinds of things I used to share in my personal networks with my friends. And it's a real loss of freedom in some way, having to carry the responsibility of the awareness that clients might be reading what I post.
It's kind of funny too when you break out of that mold that you've built for yourself online somehow, and then I tend to get a lot of feedback if I ever swear online, for example. I try not to do that because my mom reads my Twitter feed, but when it does slip out once in a while, the feedback I get is enormous. I can't believe you did that. That's so unlike you. I would never expect you to use that kind of language. And I'm like, I know it's not the most professional kind of language, but I'm also a real human being, and sometimes I have strong opinions about things, and they're going to come out. So it's funny the way that, you know, these perceptions get built up about you based on this persona that you're making online for yourself, and then when you crack that mold, it can be difficult for people to understand.
That said, when people meet you for the first time after having followed you online for however many months or years, are they ever surprised? Do they ever say, "I thought you'd be different"?
You know, I don't get too much of that, maybe mostly with the swearing. It is interesting. I've gotten that once or twice where people are surprised by, I don't know, different aspects of my personality. I can't pull any particular one off the top of my head right now. But yeah, you build up an online persona, and that doesn't always completely 100% gel with your meet space persona.
So a recent Newsweek article by Tony DeCopel on the Internet and DSM states, Peter Wybrow, the director of the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior at UCLA, argues that, quote, "the computer is like electronic cocaine, fueling cycles of mania followed by depressive stretches. When the new DSM is released next year, internet addiction disorder will be included for the first time, albeit in an appendix tagged for, quote, further study. China, Taiwan, and Korea recently accepted the diagnosis and began treating problematic web use as a grave national health crisis." Dr. Kolmes, what are your views on internet addiction and its introduction into the DSM?
It's very controversial. I have very mixed feelings about it myself, and I really want to see more research as it comes along. I have trouble with the naming of addictive disorders for each new thing that comes along. I'll confess that I have difficulty with the concept of sex addiction. I think that very often what is happening is people are depressed or anxious, and we already have diagnostic categories that describe these things, and that these diagnoses may lead people to engage in behaviors that are not so healthy. So it's unclear to me whether internet addiction is the appropriate diagnosis for someone who's spending a lot of time on the internet, or are they socially anxious and this feels like a coping mechanism, or are they depressed and they can't leave the house and so they're spending a lot of time online. So I would prefer to look at what the underlying issue is before I plunk another diagnosis in the DSM about that.
So why do some people develop problematic behaviors with the internet? Why is it so hard for us to disconnect?
Well, I think it's some of the things that I've mentioned, if they're already experiencing a mood disorder. But I also think our culture is changing so quickly. And now our work and our social lives are all coming at us through our laptops and our phones. And it's one of those things where things are changing so quickly, and we haven't yet developed coping mechanisms for how to manage it. And Veronica and I have both talked about feeling overwhelmed by our inboxes at times.
I'm a good case study.
As am I. And so I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what to do with this problem. I've been on the internet since 1993, and when I had 10 people emailing me, this wasn't a problem. So I don't know if the problem is the internet, or if it's that now everyone is on the internet and it's so pervasive, and the expectations of response time, or feeling like you could be finished with work at the end of the day but people from work are still sending you messages, is part of what's the problem. So I think that's making it pretty complicated for people.
And especially, I know, high-level corporate folks or high-level folks in any organization, the ones that go on vacation with their BlackBerry and they're not really on vacation, they're texting at the beach.
And there's pressure. There's pressure within corporations to be available like that, and people are rewarded for performing at that level. So people are being rewarded for not taking time off.
It's very difficult when, as you said, your social life, your work life, and your personal time fun are all wrapped into the same kind of space. My work, my social, everything is online, and then when I want to escape the stress of that, I go into World of Warcraft or go into some other kind of online game, and it seems like it's cyclical. But at the same time, I feel like on a personal level, people who want to learn how to unplug, doing things outdoors like hiking or getting out into nature a little bit, I'm learning to associate positive feelings of well-being with those kinds of experience as much as I do with the experience of being in an online game. And so that's kind of helping me to break out of that always plugged in mode, knowing that, oh, it'll be really nice to get outside for a little bit today and not have to deal with my inbox.
Some of the strategies I've been employing are things like just checking email a certain number of days, which takes some reassuring self-talk that those messages, they're not going to go away. They'll still be there when I check my email later. And giving myself permission to just be in read-only mode, that I can go and look but not respond. And doing blackout periods where I shut down at a particular time, whether it's 8 or 9 at night, and then say I'm not checking email or social networks for another 12 hours. And I'm focusing on other stuff. And if I want to connect, I'm picking up the phone and calling a friend like we did in the old days.
I don't even know how to talk on the phone anymore. But it is true. I mean, there's been numerous studies done that show that, you know, having your computer in the bedroom at night can lead to a lot of issues, you know, both with intimacy and getting proper sleep. You know, the bedroom should be for 2 things, sleep and sex. That's it. It shouldn't be for email. And so I think that, you know, we're learning to put internet and learning to put social media in its proper place, and definitely turning the computer off, you know, 7 or 8 o'clock at night, giving yourself a few hours of wind down time before you hit the sack is very, very important for not just mental health, but for your physical health as well.
Well, thank you so much, Veronica, and thank you, Dr. Kolmes, for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation and found it really informative, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
To read Dr. Kolmes' blog, Mindful Musings, visit her website at drkkolmes.com. If you'd like to learn more about Veronica and her views on technology, visit her website at veronicabelmont.com. To read the Newsweek article by Tony DeCopel on the evolving relationship between mental health and the internet, visit newsweek.com. If you are interested in tools that monitor your internet activity, you may be interested in the following. LeechBlock is a Firefox add-on designed to block time-wasting sites. Learn more and download at addons.mozilla.org. Antisocial is a productivity application for Macs that turns off the social parts of the internet. Learn more and download at anti-social.cc. Stay Focused is an extension for Google Chrome that increases your productivity by limiting the amount of time spent on time-wasting websites. Learn more and download at chrome.google.com/webstore. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.